Hey everybody, it's Marking Bad, and it's time for Chapter 8 in Reasonable Replies to SJWs, starring Tim Blake, also known as A Motivator Opinion.
How do you define right-wing? Anti-SJWs often have an aversion to being labeled as right-wing, yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left. Therefore, why is being labeled right-wing a bad thing to you? And if it's because right-wing is used as a pejorative, can you not see how labeling people as SJWs or regressives is also pejorative?
So this is going to take a little time, Tim. One, the question of right versus left is far more complicated than most people imagine. Originally, it referred to the difference between Republicans and monarchists in France. It has come to mean liberals in the English style versus libertines in the French style, and in modern culture it means Republicans versus Democrats, although even 60 years ago it was Democrats to the right, Republicans to the left. So we need to be careful how we're using this. If we're solely using this as conservative to the right and liberal to the left, the reason I dislike being characterized as a right-winger is because I'm not a right-winger. I'm actually to the left of center. And when I use the term regressive specifically, Tim, as I've done in conversation with you, I'm not referring to a person. I'm referring to an opinion or a position. I sincerely think that treating women like children and treating blacks like they need to be protected from society by segregating them is regressive. I think that goes back a step. That's not a progression of any description. That's treating them like they're incapable of success unless we protect them from the big, scary boogeyman that is white people.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
Part of the reason that you're asked to defend or comment on the positions of other feminists, Tim, is because underlying all branches of feminism is that definition that is so frequently brought up: the political, social, economic, and legal equality of women to men. If I just take the example of trans-exclusionary feminists and trans-inclusionary feminists, those are two groups that claim to be feminist, both claim to be using the same base definition, and both of them have very, very different positions on what feminism is and should be. I need to know where you are concerning those issues, because that will impact the discussions we have. If I don't know where you stand, if I can't put my cards on the table for you and expect you to put your cards back, we can't have a discussion of any type whatsoever. And if you can find people that label as poorly as I do, that is to say, not at all, you can certainly ask me what I think about their opinions and get a good grasp of how I feel about various topics.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid, and that reduces us to beasts? If that was the case, wouldn't I attempt to get laid from my views instead of not ever trying that?
It's every bit as absurd as assuming that women that don't support feminism don't support it explicitly to gain the attention of men. It's called virtue signaling, Tim, and everybody to some extent does it for good or for ill. Just because you're a feminist, I don't assume that you're trying to get into women's pants, but there are people that use their involvement in social movements to attempt to sleep with other people. As an example of virtue signaling that I consider to be entirely neutral, if you look at the stereotypical behaviors associated with predominantly submissive gay males, you have what's called campy behavior. Those behaviors are a form of virtue signaling in order to signal that they are looking for male sexual partners, ideally older and more dominant ones. These are common social behaviors amongst human beings, Tim. Don't take it too hard. I'm sure you will meet a nice man or woman that does wonderful things for your heart rate.
I don't think so, Tim.
And on that note, I will apologize to Tim. I couldn't resist one last jab at him. But that does conclude Chapter 9 of Reasonable Replies to SJWs, starring the questions of Tim Blake, also known as A Motivator Opinion. If you have questions, concerns, comments, or irrational hatred, please find me in the comments section below, or feel free to find me on Facebook and Twitter. Or don't, because I'm here for my validation and not for yours.